Welcome, everyone, to the Chicago Football Connection podcast. I'm your host, Steve Letizia. Follow me on Twitter at CFC joined by my co-host, Luke O'Grady. Follow him on Twitter at Luke O'Grady. Luke, we are just about a week away from the draft, and we did our trenches breakdown last week. So we did O-tackle, interior offensive line, D-tackle, defensive end. Went about 2 hours. A lot of fun, but it went about 2 hours, which is very long. But we're going to continue that this week. We're just doing wide receivers and cornerbacks today.
Yeah.
So hopefully we don't have that same marathon. We're still going to try and keep it to an hour like we normally do.
Yep.
But how are you feeling about these positions just overall heading in a week away from the draft?
Yeah, I mean the positions that we're reviewing are the ones that polls has kind of said are like the premier positions. So the ones that you'll imagine that he'll take the most swings at in the draft. The more I looked at them, the more I kind of liked all of these groups. Like, I didn't love the defensive end group until I kind of went through them and was like, man, you know what? Like, there's a lot of ways that the board falls where, like, there's a lot of these players I'd be very happy with the Bears taking. And you know what? By the time I got through the receivers, like, I started and I had a couple of opinions when I'd done, like, my first, like, 5 or 6. But then as I kind of went through, like, I just kept finding players that I liked. And it was kind of similar, too, with the cornerback group. Like, cornerback I don't think has as much depth as receiver. But I think that, like, legit 2 of the best players in this entire draft are cornerbacks. Like, the top 2 are almost like kind of, it feels like to me, are in like their own like category, and then there's a little bit of a step down after that. But this receiver class is a bunch of fun, and there's very, very little, like, I found myself disagreeing with like the national narrative, and like the more I look at it, the more like there seems to be a lot of like differing opinions like on it. Like, you know, some people will have, not to spoil too much, someone like a Jalen Hyatt anywhere from like a 5 to like a 12 and like everything in between. So it'll be interesting to see, like, you know, where we have them and what everyone thinks about them. But like, I had a lot of fun doing this group. We talked about this when we were doing the offensive line, that like I feel like my favorite position to look at and scout is, I know you were saying yours was offensive tackle and guard, but I think mine's receiver, just because, and I said it in a tweet today, there's so many different flavors. Like, there's so many players that do the exact same role and do it so differently that like it's hard to like, and we'll go into it, but it's hard to like say like 2 deep threats that play the game like a lot of the same but look totally different doing it. Like, who do you put ahead of each other?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I like what you said about the cornerbacks having the 2 blue chippers, you know, because it seems like this is a weak draft at the top. I'd say a lot of good depth, but not a lot of position groups with multiple guys who are blue chippers. And cornerback is definitely a position where you have 2 top guys, 2 clear cut top guys. I'd say no matter what order you have them in. Wide receiver, you know, doesn't have a top guy, so it's completely different.
I think there's a top guy.
We think there's a top. I guess that's true. I think we have the same guy top 1, but depending on who you ask, someone else, you could probably have like 4 different people as your number 1 receiver, depending on who you ask. So let's get into the wide receivers then. Let's start there. We tweeted this out this morning. I tweeted out from the COC account. So if you haven't seen it, keep watching the stream, but also you can go check that out. Read the comments. A lot of people had some good thoughts in the comments there. But here are our top 10. As you can see, we have the same number 1 as we just mentioned, Jackson Smith-Njigba. To me, I think he's pretty clearly the number 1.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt leaving it. Like, it felt to me that like the top 5 I have listed here, I really like Josh Downs too, but maybe the top 6 or a little bit ahead of the rest of them. And then I would say that the top 4, at least on my list, actually the same top 4 on yours, are a little bit of a cut above the rest. But when I finished, like, you know, I haven't been doing grading for a lot of years, so I don't have a whole lot of reference. The more we do this, you know, the more we'll start to be able to like have like historical grades and find out how we really have people stacked up. But I did have Jackson Smith-Njigba a couple points clear of the field, which wasn't true of a lot of the position groups that we did. And I would say that he is kind of in a tier of his own as like my favorite receiver in this draft. I've actually like when I was finalizing this last night, because I did, you know, we started this 2 or 3 months ago, and like last night I was like getting ready to like put my stamp on it, and then I was like, man, like I haven't watched like Josh Downs or Jackson Smith-Njigba or Jordan Addison in like 2 months, so I had to go back and do it again. And watching Jackson Smith-Njigba, man, he is just so fun. And like I said, I really do think that he's like a little bit of a slice above the rest. And I kind of warmed to the idea that, and I know it probably won't happen, but if the Bears stay at 9 and decide that they want to take Jackson Smith-Njigba, I would be totally fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's with the Bears situation, you got DJ Moore, who's locked up, and then obviously that's going to be your wide receiver 1 for a while.
Yep.
Then you also have Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney, who are both free agents after this year. So it might
Sure.
not seem like an immediate need right now, but you're always we've mentioned this before. You're always drafting for 2 years out.
Yep.
Not
Yep.
always necessarily drafting for who's on your roster right now. So
Yep.
if you have that mindset, then a wide receiver at any point in the draft makes complete sense. I would say
got some familiarity with Fields, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think more importantly, and like kind of the way that the Bears should be looking at this draft as a whole, which is nice because there's a lot of these small slot guys. To the point I'm getting to is like all of the Bears receivers that we're like expecting to be like contributors, like Mooney, Claypool, and more, have all done their best work in the NFL out wide and have done a majority of their snaps out wide. So there really is now. That doesn't mean to say that Moore hasn't done his good work there and Mooney hasn't done good work there. They do a lot more than just being like divided to any one single role, but getting themselves a real like cut and dry like slot receiver, I think would really benefit Fields. And that like if you have that guy that you can trust to be open in 1.5 seconds, it'll help because Fields has that issue of holding on for balls too long.
Definitely. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, if he didn't miss 2022 with injury, I mean, he played a few games, but for essentially missed the season due to injury, who knows, how we'd be talking about him differently, because his 2021 was really good it's just a redshirt sophomore, or I think he was a true sophomore, actually.
Yep.
So who knows if he would have taken a step after that, we might not even be talking about him in play for the Bears at 9.
Yeah,
but
totally.
we'll never really know. Kind of now, I feel like I'd be surprised if he went before the Bears at 9. I feel like he will be on the board, whether they decide to take him or not. But I think he will be there. But I do think with his he's not fast. He's ran a 4.53 something like that at the combine, which isn't terrible. But he's definitely not a speedster. He's more quick. Really, probably the best route runner in this class. Gotta be.
His feel for like how to get how to be open for his quarterback is really, really nice. Like more than a lot of players in this draft. Like you'll watch him run like a 3 or 5 yard slant, and like based on the way like the hook zones in the middle are set up, he's not just hitting it and then trying to run as fast away as he can from the first person. Like he'll hit it and take 2 hard steps and then like slow down to kind of just be open in that zone for a second without stopping. And I think he does that better, like that little nuance of like knowing when he's open and trying to be open in that space for as long as he can, better than anyone in the class. And he really does translate to strictly a slot receiver. His long speed is bad. If you look at his splits, he's got like a pretty good like upper echelon 10 yard. His 20 yards okay, and then his full 40 is like not so good. And his his quickness stats, like 3 cone in the shuttle, are like people throw the term around generational, but those are like they were about as good as they've been at the combine in the last 10 years, 15 years, which is that's about a generation. So he really translates to just a very pure slot receiver, and I think that that there's a really big place for that in the modern game.
Yeah, he probably won't ever be a deep threat. He's going to work in the underneath intermediate zones, which is important. But I think the lack of 3-level versatility kind of limits his upside.
Yep.
I don't see him as that dominant number 1 wide receiver. He's going to be in the pros probably just a really good number 2 wide receiver. I think that's kind of his ceiling, just because of his athletic limitations. Like as I said, he doesn't provide much value in the the deep third of the field. So I think that does kind of limit his upside. But if you're just looking for a guy who could be in the slot and work that short to intermediate, then I think he's a perfect fit for your offense. It depends on what your offense does. If you're a vertical passing game, maybe like the Bills, like play action vertical, you're probably not going to draft a Jackson Smith-Njigba, even if he was there later on. But if you want to work the middle of the field and you want to work the intermediate zones, I think he's absolutely your top guy.
Yep. Yeah, I think he provides more big playability than his speed would suggest, just being that I think he actually has really nice rack for how good he is and how shifty he is. But like, the deepest he'll get is probably that seam route that goes for 25 yards. And if he breaks a tackle, maybe he could turn it to a 45 yard. But if he's getting chased, he's almost always going to get caught.
I do have some questions about how well his rack ability would translate to the NFL level, just because he's not explosive. Like I know he did it in college and a good yards after catch numbers, but I still want to see him do it at the pro level before I say that's going to be like a strength of his. Do I think he can do it? Yes. Do I think he could be that can be an elite trade for him? I'm not sure yet. I got to see a little bit more, but that is the problem with missing a full year. We're working off a real small sample size here. Yeah. So
Basically,
It does.
Basically 1 year, but one of the most dominant years of like a college
Yeah,
football receiver seen in a while. You know what's funny is I
absolutely.
know everybody's seen that quote about Olave and Garrett Wilson saying that he's like the best receiver they've ever played with, but I didn't know this until recently. I think Peter Bukowski tweeted it out. That quote was before his 2020 season. Like they were saying
Oh,
that
really?
in the preseason before he popped off like that. So like there was like that like knowledge in the building that like you give this guy this opportunity is going to be good. But he
Yeah.
really isn't that explosive top off a defense like rack kind of player. Honestly, I was saying like it's funny how polar opposite my 1 and 2 are because all the things that Jackson
Yeah.
Smith and Jigba does good and like all of his weaknesses are pretty much the opposite with Quentin Johnson. Quentin Johnson, awesome long speed, probably the best rack in the class. Maybe not as savvy as a route runner, and maybe not as great
Mhm.
feel for the field, and he's maybe not a natural hands catcher. But his upside is through the roof.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I haven't ranked it a little bit lower than you do, but these next couple guys, you can flip flop them like in terms of just their rankings. But I do think, yeah,
Yeah,
if we're talking just different players, Jackson Smith and Jigba and Quentin Johnson, I do love Quentin Johnson's rack ability, as you said, probably the best in the class. The body catching thing really bothered me.
it is weird, man. Like
Yeah,
consistently,
it
and
just
like he has
consistently every
moments
time.
where he stabs it out of the air, but even on those balls downfield when he's going up for jump balls, he's going up with his elbows tucked into his chest. It is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and he measured a little bit smaller than we thought he was going to be, which we've talked about. We don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but he was
Yeah.
about 6'2", 210, something
Yep.
like that. So in that area, I just wish he played kind of up to that size a little bit more. I feel like he's a smaller wide receiver stuck in a big wide receiver's body because the
Yeah.
hands catching. He doesn't have a big catch radius because of that, as you
No, he
expect someone his size to have. The body catching thing, and just he can get kind of out physical. Not so much at the line of scrimmage. I think he beats press okay, or at least good enough as for a rookie, a guy who's
Yep.
is going to get better, but more so at the catch point and stuff like that.
Agreed.
So that's why I had him a little bit lower. I will say I think he's a better route runner than given credit for. He's not like a Jalen Hyatt who's just athletic and can run in a straight line. He's athletic and can really jump, but I think, and despite being like 6'2", I think he sinks his hips, gets in and out of cuts.
Yeah,
pretty good for a guy his size. So that definitely kept him in my top 4.
Yeah, when I was watching him, I think honestly, like the way he was moving, when we thought he was 6'4", I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And then when you found out he was 6'2", you're like, okay, this makes a little bit more sense because he's
Yeah.
not that like real long, lanky athlete. He's just on the more like upper side of like your normal size receivers. Like he's probably only like maybe an inch or so taller than like Justin Jefferson or like Devontae Adams. So like he's not huge, which is why it didn't look, now looking back on it, it's not so crazy seeing him get so deep into his cuts and change direction as fast as he is.
Right. Yeah. But I think if you're talking about a higher ceiling play, I mean, maybe not higher ceiling than Jackson Smith and Jigba, but a guy who, well, maybe he is. Maybe because I think he really could be, has the athleticism and the talent to be a true number 1 wide receiver. I just think the odds of him reaching that level are a lot low. I'll take Jackson Smith and Jigba's expected outcome over Quentin Johnston. I think we're both on the same page there.
Yeah, I was saying today that I think a funny good comp for Jackson Smith and Jigba is Devontae Adams because
I don't hate that at all.
Despite the fact that I think Devontae Adams is maybe about 10 pounds heavier and about an inch taller, but it's really not that big of a difference. And the things that you love about Devontae Adams, like really, really polished, patient route runner, like awesome with his hands, like just a savvy receiver, good around the boundary, like keeps his space. Like when he gets open, he like knows how to stay open for like keeping a window for his quarterback, and like he'll probably do a better job of beating you deep. But like he's not really running away from people. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Jackson Smith and Jigba got asked to play outside more at the NFL. That he proved that he can stem because he hand fights so well at the point of contact that he really only needs to separate for 10 to 15 yards, and he's not slow at a 4.5. There's a lot of these guys in these class who were expected to be fast and were running in that 4.48 range, and that's really not so different than what Jackson Smith and Jigba was doing.
Yeah, I think he can play on the outside. I don't think he is going to be great there. I think it's kind of like you can move him around a little bit. He's not that slot only guy that maybe he was set out projected to be, tagged to be is maybe. But I think he could play. He could play there, but I definitely don't think that's going to be where his strength is. Yeah, I don't hate the Devontae comp just because of their route running ability. I think it's obviously a lofty comp, and I don't think
Yeah.
he's going to reach Devontae Adams level. But just from a route running standpoint and the way he varies his routes, I definitely see what you're saying, and actually think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, a comp that gets thrown around for him a lot is Julian Edelman, and I think that as
Mhm.
far as what you'd expect to see from a role in the NFL is probably closer to that. But if you're like a little bit bigger and a little bit higher production rate than a Julian Edelman, if you can stay healthy, like he'll be an awesome pro.
I think Julian Edelman would be like his floor because I think he is a
Yeah,
high floor receiver.
yeah,
Like
I
I
think
don't see him being any worse than that. I know other people throwing around Amon-Ra St. Brown,
Yep.
who's a younger guy, so we don't really know exactly what he's going to be in his career. But I think kind of similar guys who he's not a deep threat, but does really well in the short intermediate area.
Yep.
So I think that's a good one
Just to
too.
get open and stay open. We both have Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers with the ball in his hands moves about as nicely as anyone in this class. He like him and Quentin Johnson move similarly, and that's what makes Quentin Johnson so interesting. Is that Quentin Johnson's 30 pounds heavier and 4 inches taller. But like Zay Flowers is like he checks a lot of boxes. I would say he probably almost has a better catch radius than Quentin Johnson because
I was just gonna say, I think he
natural.
plays bigger.
Yeah, he does a way better job of catching the ball outside of his frame.
Yeah.
His numbers could have been so much better. Like he was hampered by bad quarterback play as much as almost anybody in this draft class. And despite that, he was still one of the most productive and exciting receivers, like in the NCAA. Like when they really worked to get him the ball because like the downfield passing game they kind of struggled with. So they did all kinds of reverses and screens and drag routes and stuff just to get him with the ball with his hand in space. And when he did, man, he was really exciting.
Yeah, I really like Zay Flowers. I wanted to put him higher. I really toyed with putting him at 2, or I even thought about him at 1, to be honest, because I just really like him. But I felt good putting him here because I like what you said about his catch radius. I think he plays bigger than his frame. He's only 5'9" and a half, 182 pounds, something like that. So he's a little smaller. But I don't really have a concern. Watching him, I don't really have a concern with the size. I feel like he's quick enough. He's probably more of a slot only guy than Addison. That's kind of why I put him there, despite actually weighing more than Jordan Addison. But yeah, I really like his game. The way he runs with the ball in his hands, I think he could be a deep threat too, which is something that maybe some other guys on this list can't do. He might be slot only, but
I think he can
still
play
be, but he can play outside, and I think he can still be a deep threat from wherever he is on the field because he's got the speed. He's got the burst, so I think he can do all of that. He's like I said, I mentioned with Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's not a true 3-level threat. I think Zay Flowers is a true 3-level threat. He just might not do the short and intermediate as well as Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Yeah, I mean, you never want to throw around these really lofty comparisons, and I bet you'd feel the same though. It's really hard to watch Zay Flowers play and not see a lot of Antonio Brown to his game. And when you go back and look at like their numbers, like the very similar, like they're both 5'10", they're both I think Zay Flowers is like 182, and I think Antonio Brown was like 184. The way they drag their feet when they're setting up their cuts, the way they slow down before they get really explosive. They both have really big hands. I think they both have over 9-inch hands. Now, obviously, one of the most productive receivers in our entire lifetime is a pretty lofty thing to compare him to. But when you're seeing like the style of game that you're going to get with Zay Flowers, that's kind of what you would hope his ceiling to be similar to. And if he gets into an offense that has like even like a mediocre quarterback, like can get him the ball at the second and third level, I think you'll see like a really, really productive. He might be like rookie season. He might be like the most like pro ready, like legitimately.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think he steps in right away into offense as a true threat. I can't even tell you how many overthrows I saw from Boston College when he beats guy deeps. And I want to like if the Bears drafted him, I would put together a whole like compilation of it because
overthrows
there's so many
level, like
every level,
overthrowing hooks, overthrowing deep throws.
Everything. Yeah, that Boston College offense was a mess. He was that offense. And despite everyone knowing he's getting the ball, he still was able to produce. So I really like Zay Flowers.
Jordan Addison. You had Jordan Addison at 2.
So yeah, I had Jordan Addison too. So we just kind of flip flopped Addison and Johnston.
We did.
It's kind of just what flavor you're looking for.
And honestly, I was really like tape wise, like Jordan Addison's tape is like I could have had him at 2. Like off the line, there's no one. I honestly think that he looked the most explosive off the line and like the most I don't even know what the word is. The most dangerous off the line. Like his release package is so quick, and he's so, like he stems so well at the top of his routes and at his breaks that like he's so good at separating. His tape is and like his tape at it was UCLA, and then
Pittsburgh.
Pitt, and then at USC is like so at Pitt he played a whole bunch in the slot and looked awesome. Then he moved to USC and played a whole bunch out wide and he looked awesome. But man, he went to the combine. If he weighed 8 pounds more, I would have had him at 2. But 172, something like that, like it's worrisome. And that's true of a couple of guys in this class for sure.
Yeah.
Which is why Jordan Addison is above all the rest of those little guys. But all the rest of those guys, like your Josh Downs, like your Jalen Hyatts, like of them, he looked the best. And if he was, like I said, 8 or 9 pounds more, I would have had no problem putting him at 2. His tape is awesome. He's awesome with the ball in his hands. He's got sure hands, really savvy route runner. Even despite the fact that he's a little bit small, he'll go over the middle and catch passes for you.
Yeah. I have him at 2. Basically, the only thing I didn't like about him, and the only thing keeping him from 1 is his weight. He was under 180 pounds. There's not a lot of under 180 pound wide receivers that are successful in the NFL. But I think the NFL is kind of moving that way. Like I think we're going to start seeing more and more. I mean, just looking at these guys coming in here, like it's just the way that the game is changing and with the rule changes, you can be a little bit lighter and still compete. And the way with spread offenses, you don't need, you're going to be. I mean, he doesn't struggle that much with press.
No, I don't think so.
Coverage. He's got a good release package, so there are times he does. Just if a cornerback's able to get their hands on him, it's done. He just doesn't have the size. But if he can still get a clean release with just quickness and with his hands, so I don't have a huge worry there. I think he can play inside and out. I think he'd be again a true 3-level threat. He can catch a screen and take it out. He could also run a go route.
Yeah, he's got really nice rack.
Really good route runner. Probably one of the best in the class. I mean, I think when we're talking route runners, the class is JSN, Addison, Flowers, probably. Yeah. Those 3. If we're just talking route running ability. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't legit like the biggest con for him and like is the weight thing. Just because it's hard to have comparisons. Like people will say, "Well, look at Devontae Smith. That'll be the guy that a lot of these small guys compare to because he's lighter than all of them. He's only 170 and he is getting it done. So there has been a path blazed for smaller receivers in the league. But if it means anything, the issue that we have with weight for these receivers coming in is true of a lot of these DBs that we have coming in too. And in 5 years down the road, those will be the people they're competing against. And there are some DBs that weigh 10 pounds less than him that we'll be talking about on this show.
Yeah, definitely. It's just the way the offense is going. So it might seem weird, these last couple of years, and then maybe the next, and maybe after that. But in 5 years, 175-pound wide receiver is probably going to be more the norm than anything. And I just think he does so much well that I'm willing to overlook 171 pounds. I'm just willing to overlook that right now. I'm not even that concerned about the 4.49. I think that's a fine time for him.
And honestly, you can honestly throw that out. When he gets to the top of his routes, the way that he separates and accelerates is so much better than whatever that 4.49 was. I could care less. And
so he's so smooth. I did think his 2021 was better than his 2022.
Yeah, I think he naturally fits as a slot more.
Yeah.
But
I think that will help him
more. And honestly, the fact that he stepped up and looked as good as he did, like playing a majority of snaps on the outside, only helped his case more.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking comps, I think a good comp for him is Darnell Mooney, which obviously Bears fans are going to be very familiar with. Very similar size, not as fast, but
not as fast. But honestly, I think like probably better with the ball in his hands and probably
better route runner.
Yeah. So like a better Darnell Mooney isn't a bad comp at all, and Darnell Mooney's been an awesome pro so far. I would say that, we're both coming in as Cedric Tillman at 5, but at least in my mind, those 4 guys were kind of their own tier. And then I almost have Tillman and Downs in another tier after that. But like Tillman kind of the grading system I had or I was doing, those were the guys that had 80s. And then I had Cedric Tillman alone as a 79.
Yeah, I was going to say, I almost have Tillman in his own tier, to be honest, because I just don't love this wide receiver class that much. But yeah, I like Cedric Tillman a lot. Another guy who, this is kind of like Jackson Smith and Jigba, didn't play a lot this year, but his 2021 tape was really, really good.
Yep. And
finally a bigger wide receiver.
Oh yeah, it seems to me that there's very few like true X's in this class. Like a lot of the
Yeah,
guys in this class are those Y guys.
yeah.
Cedric Tillman is a true X, and honestly, like if he played more this year, not only do I think that you could make an argument that he'd be farther up this list, like his game is so good that like I would imagine that because of how good he was, you would see Jalen Hyatt move down the board just because he got a huge target share once Tillman was gone. And Jalen Hyatt's a good player, but like man, I think that on that team there was no doubt that he was the best receiver on that team when he was healthy.
Yeah, and I think there's just not that many true X wide receivers. Like in my list, I think I only have 3.
Yeah,
and the rest of guys, I think you might maybe have one more in yours if you count Jonathan Mingo, which I don't know. He's kind of a guy who could play.
He's probably
positions,
he's X-bodied, because he's like 220.
Yeah.
But like on Tillman, I mean, it's basically like what's not to like. You have some concerns being that he was injured, but I don't think that those that are like he was injured far enough back that he'll have a full training camp and people available like teams have been able to do their medicals on them. We haven't heard anything bad on that. He's got incredibly soft hands. He goes up and gets it like you want an X2. He can like attack the ball better than almost anybody in this class, I would say.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these guys that are big, like we were saying, like, I don't think they do a great job of going up and attacking it. Tillman does. Like he can fight through contact. He's got good contact balance. He tracks the deep ball so well. Like his catch radius, he makes it so easy for his quarterbacks to find him. Great control and body work around the boundary. I think he's got big play speed. I don't think he's like that X where, hopefully he'll have to run away and find a sideline. Like I think if he gets even with someone, he can long stride them for a big play. Like Cedric Tillman, I think is going to be an awesome pro.
Yeah, long strider for sure. More build-up speed than initial quickness. But he did run a 4.54, which isn't bad for a guy who's 6'3", 215.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about a high point in the football and going up and attacking the football because that's something you didn't see a lot in this class. So it was kind of a breath of fresh air to watch him and be like, okay, finally someone high pointed the football and like helped out their quarterback a little bit here. So that's why I really liked him. He's very different than pretty much everyone we talked about, even Quentin Johnston, I would say. But yeah, true X receiver. He had a really good game against Kelee Ringo, who I'm sure we'll talk about later in the second half of this. We'll get into that. We'll get into that. But he had a really good game against him, who's widely considered one of the, depending on who you ask, top cornerback in this class. And so I think that was really good to see. He did it in the SEC. I know people talk about Tennessee's offense a lot, about being a very wide receiver friendly offense, which it is. And I think if we're going to talk about that with Jalen Hyatt, we should probably talk about it with Cedric Tillman. But they did play different roles in that offense. And I think Cedric Tillman's role was a little bit more difficult. He wasn't always getting free releases like Jalen Hyatt was.
They asked a lot more of Cedric Tillman.
They asked a lot. So, but I still think it is still a wide receiver friendly scheme for him as well. So that I think, just got to point that out. But yeah, I think he gives you everything you want.
Yeah.
In a wide receiver. There isn't a whole lot of things you don't like in his game.
Nope. And I think he's NFL ready. He doesn't need to add much to his frame. I think year one you can draft him and ask him to play 500 snaps out wide. He can.
Yeah, and at this point in the rankings, I don't think we're talking about wide receivers ones anymore. But I think he could be a really solid wide receiver 2 for a team in a few years once he reaches his full potential, and be just a guy you really like.
To have like multiple players, but I really don't see any reason why like Cedric Tillman can't be the main producer on a team. Like it's possible. But I just think the likely outcome is more he's like a wide receiver 2. Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's like the top end talent in this class isn't exactly like other classes in the past. But I would honestly say, too, to that point, that Cedric Tillman, in my mind, is kind of the cutoff for wide receiver ones. There are some asterisks, like we'll get to it, but I think guys that, like, if you need, like, them to produce alone, fourth quarter, who you're going to go to, I think Cedric Tillman can be a guy that you can go to. Because, like we said, one, if he's not covered, if he's covered well, like, I would argue he's still kind of open in the way that he reacts to like passes behind him and in front of him. He's got really soft hands. He's good around the boundary. So he's more open than he looked from time to time. And I think he gets open really nicely.
Yeah, I think that's a fair scouting report. Do we want to?
I mean, I was gonna say
Josh
Scott. I think Tyler Scott, like he could totally be on that list for me. Honestly, I just kind of thought that he kind of was in that Hyatt category for me, and that like I thought both of those guys didn't do a great job underneath. You worry about them ever kind of having to go over the middle, and I think that to be honest, more than Hyatt. I thought Tyler Scott kind of struggled with drops, but by the same merit, on a straight run away from you speed, he probably was the best in the class.
I think the reason I have Tyler Scott above Jalen Hyatt is I think Tyler Scott is a much better route runner than Jalen Hyatt.
Okay, I think that to be honest,
he's able to get in and out of his cuts so much better than Hyatt is. And I think, yeah, I mean, I guess I could see what you're saying. There were some drops, but to be honest, drops don't concern me that much. I think they're just part of the game. If you're giving me big playability, I'm willing to live with a drop every now and then. As long as you give me big playability, which Tyler Scott absolutely brings to the table as a deep threat. He really gets his whole body into routes, which I like. He's like gets the head fakes. He doesn't telegraph his routes where he's going. So I think from a route running perspective, he's head and shoulders above Jalen Hyatt to me. And then he's just as fast and athletic, and the way he moves when you watch it, like he ran a 4.44, which is fast but not crazy fast.
That's another one where it's like you can throw that out if you watch him. His tape is so fun when he's hip to hip to someone. He might as well already be 5 yards ahead of them. He is blazing.
Yep, and you can see that from his 10-yard split was 1.5. Which is crazy. So I really like Tyler Scott. I think I knew I was going to be higher on him than most people, and that's fine.
I actually
kind of like my guy.
Like Tyler Scott. To be honest, I think he's really been rising up the boards. When we did a mock draft the other day, I think we drafted Tyler Scott in like the fourth, and someone was like, he's not going to get out of the second, which I think is a little bit of maybe an exaggeration, but that really has been like the sentiment with him. He's been shooting up draft boards for a long time. His teammate Trey Tucker was expected to be like the Cincinnati receiver that went. And now I would say that nobody would argue that Tyler Scott is almost the favorite from that group. He definitely does have better route running than Jalen Hyatt. And honestly, it's hard to say much about that because Jalen Hyatt ran basically one route. Like he ran a post or a deep. And the thing that really is tough about Jalen Hyatt is when he went to the combine, some of his like agility work really didn't look good. And it made you kind of think, okay, like maybe he is just a straight runner. To both their credits, and to Marvin Mims a little different because I think Marvin Mims does a better job of running some of the other routes as well. But I think all those guys aren't like just straight runners. Like I think they all play the ball well and have good concentration in catching those deep routes. Like I don't think you have to worry about them kind of being like bad receivers but good runners. Like I think they're all like receivers, but I think that Jalen Hyatt of all of them is the biggest one-trick pony, and that's why I have him down to 10.
Yeah, and that's why I have Scott ahead of him, and I could have probably put Mims ahead of him too. I think Mims was 11 for me, so he was very close to making this list. And I very seriously considered putting him at 10, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, I like Tyler Scott. So you at 6 at Josh Downs, who I had a little bit lower, but the North Carolina wide receiver who's one of the reasons I ranked him lower is just because he's so small. He's so small.
Another one of those guys.
5'9", 170 pounds. Yeah. And I think unlike some of the other guys that are, the same size above him, I don't see him as a 3-level threat at all. I mean, I think he's more of an underneath guy. Maybe he can, he can play in the intermediate, but I don't think that's going to be a strength of his either. He's also to me slot only and not super. Well, he actually tested better than I thought, but
he tested good, and that was kind of one of the reasons I was able to move him up.
But yeah, I got it now. 5'8", just under 5'9", 171 pounds. So pretty small. But
yeah, I mean, game style wise, he's a lot like a Zay Flowers. Like their game is very similar. The reason that Zay Flowers is so high ahead of him is Zay Flowers has 11 pounds on him, which is like not a whole lot, but at the place that Downs is at, it kind of puts Flowers into that comfortable threshold. I think Flowers has way better run after the catch ability. You don't get a whole lot of that with Downs. He's a bit of a slasher. Like I think he can find a hole on his first cut, but if it's one-on-one in space, like he kind of has a little bit of Tyler Lockett to him where he might as well sometimes he'll just hit the turf, like live to fight another play. And that's kind of like how he'll sustain a better career at the next level, being that he's 170 pounds. One thing I will say though is he might have a better catch radius than Quentin Johnson. I actually think his ability to catch the ball off his body was one of the best in the class. Like he has really, really nice natural hands, and his short area quickness is elite. And those kind of things alone, I think, is like enough to sustain a career for him. I actually do think that he can like make it as a 3-level guy in the slot. It's kind of one of those seam things again, where he could like rip off like kind of a bendy seam if they're playing cover 2 or if they're playing like quarters. But I think that he probably has better speed than Jackson Smith and Jigba to finish those as a touchdown run. But I don't think that he's like a burner. Like if a guy's 10 yards off and has a feeling that he's going deep, like I don't think he'll just turn it on and run by him. So
yeah. To me, he's like the consolation prize if you don't get Jackson Smith and Jigba, because I think they're similar players. Just Smith and Jigba does everything a little bit better than Downs, which is why the different in ranking there. But he doesn't provide much after the catch, but I do like the way he sits in zones. I think people might think like playing against zone isn't a talent, but I disagree. I think Josh Jones does really good stuff against zone, finding holes zone, sitting on and giving his quarterback a target. I also really like the way he always comes back to the football.
Yep.
He's never sitting there waiting for it to get to him. I think he's just a really, really smart wide receiver who's going to have a long career. I just question his long-term upside. I think he's a nice wide receiver to have, maybe like a wide receiver 3, and I think that's kind of it for him to me.
I mean, I really do like his upside. I'd say like a really high-end wide receiver 2, like maybe something similar to like what you'd expect from like a Devontae Smith. Not saying they play similar, but I really do like have worries about his long-term durability. Like he plays pretty upright, like similar to Jalen Hyatt, and I think that like he's a big hit, not even like a funny hit to like his midsection away from like having like his cage rattled. Like he really does look like the durability could be an issue at the next level. Even sometimes when he's doing that dive to get to the ground, like not get hit, and the football's underneath him, it looks like it labors him more than it should.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So then you had Marvin Mims at 7. We talked about it a little bit, but and he just missed my list. Just missed my list at 11. Could have easily been 10. Probably could have easily been in consideration for 9 as well. Like I really like Marvin Mims. I do think the lack of production was a big thing for me, and so that kind of hurt him. I think he's a great deep threat, and if you are looking for a deep threat and you want your deep threat to be a little bit bigger, then you're probably going to like him more than Marvin Mims, than more than Tyler Scott and Jalen Hyatt, because he's just as fast as those guys, but bigger. But I don't think he has the quite nuance of the game as Tyler Scott, and he's not as explosive as Jalen Hyatt, so that's why I'm a little bit lower. But it's all just depends on what you like. I think he has a better chance to be more of a 3-down player than those other guys.
I think that he did more of the receiver stuff nicely. Yeah, like I would say that like they asked him to do a little more like going over the middle, doing out routes, and like I thought that like his hands and like some of his boundary work looked more of like a full complete wide receiver than some of the other guys that are like those deep threats, even though he wasn't asked to do it a whole lot. So him being there over Jalen Hyatt was more like and over like a Tyler Scott was more that like I think he showed plays that like gave the assumption that maybe he could be more than what he was asked to do. And I thought that like he with his size that like if he can do the things that Jalen Hyatt and Tyler Scott are doing on the deep point of view, you can expect maybe like incremental production more doing the other stuff. That's a little bit more exciting.
Sure.
Notice that you don't have Jonathan Mingo on there, so I'll go pretty quickly. I think that Jonathan Mingo, like just because I think we're both going to try it, we want to kind of get these in an hour. Jonathan Mingo, like he you'd almost, if you had to compare him to people again, because I don't think that you want to say, hey, this is what his upside or his ceiling is, but as far as like the game that he plays and what you could kind of expect his role to be in the pros, think of like an AJ Brown or think of like a Deebo Samuel. He looks almost like a running back with the ball in his hands. He's about 220 pounds. I think he's got really soft hands. He's just an exciting prospect, I guess. Like he's got his highlight plays, I think, are like as high as some of the best people in the class. He'll go up and get it for you. He's a big receiver. He's one of those guys that'll probably be like an X at the NFL level, but he's also a guy that I think would be like, if you could get him a jet sweep or a screen pass 2 or 3 times a game, that like, he could rip those off for you as well. I just think that there's a lot of really like impressive and like exciting things about his game.
Yeah, I like him a lot too. He was probably he was 12th, and again could have been 11th, 10th, or 9th. Like I like him too, but yeah, just for the sake of time, So you take him. I'll take Jayden Reed then because you don't have Jayden Reed on yours, just so we can get through. Because I know we want to get to the cornerbacks too. I really like Jayden Reed a lot. I wanted to rank him higher, just couldn't do it. But I feel like I'm going to regret not ranking him higher because I think he is going to be a good corner. A good wide receiver. He really did extremely well at the Senior Bowl. He was probably the standout from there,
Yep,
and I think
he was.
that's a good thing for him because I think he was flying under the radar because a lot like Zay Flowers at Boston College, the Michigan State offense is a mess. Their quarterback play was awful. There were so many times he was getting overthrown. I think he plays bigger than he is, even though he's a little bit bigger than some of the other guys. He was 5'11", 191, which I think is a great size for a wide receiver. Really good route runner too. Probably not on the same level as like Addison Flowers and Smith-Njigba, but still a pretty solid route runner.
Yeah, like I don't think his like maybe like game plan for his route running was as good as those guys, but the way he gets in and out of his breaks and like separates out of them is like really impressive.
Yeah, and I think he has 3-level threat, and I think is a guy who can maybe doesn't spend a lot of time at X, but can play X, Y, Z. He can play all the wide receiver spots. Because of his body type, because of his skill set. So I really like him.
And he can go up and get it.
He can go up and get it. He plays big.
Totally.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think again, like we was talking about, who was it? Say Marvin? Who was it? Josh Downs being the consolation prize to Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think Jane Reed's the consolation prize to Zay Flowers. I see them kind of similarly as well. So, and then I guess the last guy on this list that we both have is Michael Wilson. You have him at 9, I have him at 10. Stanford wide receiver. The only thing that's keeping him from being higher on everyone's board, not just ours, is he's played like 3 games the past 4 years or something like that. So he's just very injury prone. A lot of that's bad luck. Not a whole lot you can do. If he played a full slate, I think he'd be probably top 5. So the reason I have him at 10 is over Mims and Mingo is if I'm at that point in the draft, I'm taking the high upside swing. I think that's Michael Wilson.
Yeah, and like legit, if he played 13 games this year, like there's so much to like about him. He's got like he's got breakaway speed. I think if he beats his guy, the other guys on the other side of the field aren't catching him. He can go up and get it, I think, with as good as anyone in the class. I think his release package is one of the best in the class. Like from like 0 to 8 yards off the field, he's probably one of the most fun receivers to watch in this class. He breaks down nicely. He's really smooth. He's a good blocker. He's got really, really natural hands. He legit can go up and get it better than anyone in the class, I think. Like his route running is really patient, and like he breaks down nicely. Similar to Cedric Tillman, like when he doesn't seem open, he's more open than he looks, and his like catch radius is probably one of the best in the class. The way he adjusts to deep balls is incredible.
Yeah,
but man, the best ability in football is availability.
Yeah. I just couldn't put him higher than what I have him just because of that. Like I want to, but because I like the talent, but you just got to be healthy. And like he's had multiple injuries over multiple years. So that's just tough. But yeah, I wrote in my notes plus body control.
Yeah. Oh
just
man.
Crazy body control. The way he can contort his body in the air and still get his feet down and catch balls away from his body, I think is
honestly,
one of the tops of the class.
I would say that from like what I could see, like Jaden Reed, I feel like got a lot of talk, but honestly, I would say that Michael Wilson looked like the most impressive receiver at the Senior Bowl. And I think that the Senior Bowl should carry a lot of stock, and that you're going up against these guys where you have this opportunity, these one-on-ones to see like how maybe a smaller school person compares to some of the other school people. Yeah. And Michael Wilson looked like a stud.
Yeah, you're going up against the best of the best. If you don't show me anything, that's going to be a red flag to me.
Yep.
All right. Do you want to move on to corner?
Yep. I mean, the only one I would say is Rashee Rice and A.T. Perry just missed my list. Really like those guys taped.
Yeah.
But for one reason or another, I just couldn't do it with them. If A.T. Perry just would learn how to jump and catch ball, man, he could have easily been in that top 5. Honestly, I love his tape, and I think the way he tested was really impressive. I didn't expect him to be that athletic.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of talked about some of the guys who missed mine, but oh God, what was his name? Matt Landers is a guy who's kind of a down, day 3 guy who might be good. Jacob Copeland, is really good at Florida. Went to Maryland, maybe not as good, but I think he has a chance to kind of later in the draft. I like to stay. So okay, so let's move on to corner. Do you want me to show mine, or do you want me to? Let's just show it because we're kind of running out of time.
Yep.
Let's just show it.
Yeah.
Right, so cornerbacks.
Okay. Yeah.
So we have the same top 2. We've talked about these 2 guys are clearly the best 2 of the class. That's definitely a tier by their own. That's Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon. We just have them flip-flopped. I at one point had them listed as 1A, 1B, but I thought that was a cop-out, so I took it up. So I have Christian Gonzalez at 1, Devin Witherspoon at 2. I really like Devin Witherspoon. I love the way he plays. I think his 2022 tape is better than Christian Gonzalez's 2022 tape. I'm betting on the upside of Christian Gonzalez and the fluid hips.
Yeah.
And Christian Gonzalez didn't have bad tape. by any means. I just
No,
think
not at all.
Devin Witherspoon's click and close and reaction ability is just top tier, and a little bit more physical. But I think Christian Gonzalez will develop eventually into a better corner. Devin Witherspoon's probably a better corner right now. That was my reasoning for 1-2.
Yeah, Christian Gonzalez, regardless of position, is probably the best athlete in this draft.
Yeah,
he is so smooth in and out of his hips. There's something to be said about you want the guys, like you want your corner to look really, really good in shorts. I know that people don't put a whole lot of stock into that, but like you need them to be good reactionary athletes. And that's, being able to turn your hips and stop and like change direction, like without really game planning for it. And nobody in the class moves as smoothly as Christian Gonzalez does.
Yeah. Yep. And that's really all it was for me.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I would have Devin Witherspoon above him is I don't think that Devin Witherspoon is a bad athlete, but I think that Devin Witherspoon's instincts and like feel for the game helps, maybe any deficiencies that he might have athletically to a Christian Gonzalez. And I think that he just got better every year that he was there, to the point where, like you said, his 2022 tape is by far the best in the class I found. Like, I think he had 500 passing or coverage snaps in 2020. And he gave up 4 touchdowns. And over the last 2 years, he's had like almost 850 coverage snaps, and he's allowed 1 touchdown to like 6 interceptions. Like, he's a force in the run game. He's a playmaker, and he's just that dog that you want as a cornerback. He absolutely has that attitude that you want. He does maybe have a little bit of size concerns, but we said there are other people on this list that have bigger size concerns, and it's probably just the way of the world right now in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to bring up the size concerns because that definitely went into my consideration. 181 pounds, which, is bigger than some of the receivers we just talked about, but there aren't a lot of 180-pound cornerbacks in the league. I do think he's, almost 6 foot, so he could definitely have some room to maybe put on some weight without losing a lot of athleticism. He is also about a year and a half older than Christian Gonzalez. That also went into play. But like you said, he's more pro ready. So you're getting, if you pick him in the first round, you're getting 5 years of really, really good cornerback play. Christian Gonzalez, maybe you only get 4 years because he's going to take a year to kind of get up to speed. So it kind of evens out there.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Gonzalez, I feel like this is like a term people use all the time, but he is legitimately what it would look like if you built an NFL cornerback in a lab. 6'1", 198 pounds. Like he like if you look at his RAS, it just looks like someone colored the card green. He's elite in every category that you do it. My only thing with him is I don't know if he's a playmaker on the ball, at least at this point in his career, that you'd want from a cornerback. But to some extent, he doesn't need to be like intercepting passes at a crazy clip to be like, taking away the number 1 receiver on a team every game. And I think that Christian Gonzalez can do that at the NFL level. He is like as fluid as they come. I think that Christian Gonzalez is a football player. Ball skills, again, aren't exceptional. I felt like sometimes he lost like the feel for where the ball is, but he was so good at staying on his hip and like within that rubber band that it didn't really matter. He could react in time when someone was like to get his hands in the way to make the play. He's got sky high upside.
Yeah, agreed. So talking about those 2 guys, we should probably just quickly go into, because there's been a lot of debate on Bears Twitter. If one of those 2 guys is the pick at 9, how are we feeling? I think we've both kind of talked about this before, so I think I know what your answer is. I think we're fine with it because they're 100%. Really good players. And again, you're not always drafting for this year. You're drafting for 2 years. Jalen Johnson's a free agent. Kendall Vildor really isn't, anything more than depth.
I think the expectation is that who was our draft pick last year?
Kyler Gordon.
I think the expectation is that he's our slot guy, and both of these guys are like, they can both do it a little both because they move so nicely, but I think they both really plug in most naturally on the outside.
Yeah, I agree. I think if anyone has a better chance to be more versatile, it's Devin Witherspoon. I actually like him in the slot as well, just because he's so physical and I like his ability against the run and stuff like that. But I wouldn't take him away from the outside because I think he's got natural coverage ability too.
Yeah.
And I think Christian Gonzalez, like, it's almost like that's more of a knock on Christian Gonzalez. I don't think he'd be as good in the slot because he's not as physical of a tackler. Not that he's a bad tackler by any means, but he's just not as doesn't have the physicality that Witherspoon has.
Something that's nice is like there's some of these guys on this list are like will hang their hat on being coverage players. Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon are football players, 100%. They're not scared to get their nose dirty. And man, sometimes like they're so dialed into the play, like it felt like they're almost too quick to the point. Like they're gonna get burned on double moves at the NFL level at some point in their career because they're so like they're always in such good position, and that it'll just happen. That'll come with discipline.
Yeah, and it just comes down to what you're looking for out of your cornerbacks. If you pulled all 32 NFL teams, it wouldn't surprise me if 16 had Christian Gonzalez and 16 had Devin Witherspoon as their cornerback one, but all 32 were going to have both those guys as top 10 players.
There's no way you have another cornerback on this class ahead of them.
No, absolutely not. So yeah, if you're a guy who plays more off man, I think Devin Witherspoon's your guy because he does really good with that click and close and with the balls in front of him and reacting to him, keeping everything on him. If you want to play more maybe press man, not that Devin Witherspoon can't do it, but maybe Christian Gonzalez is your guy. I think both those guys can do both those things.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where their strengths are. So
and then we both have 3 and 4 as Deonte Banks and Joey Porter. These are both guys that if you're drafting them, you're drafting a press man corner.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Joey Porter, especially, I feel like. I think Deonte Banks is probably more versatile, but Joey Porter with what he is, 34-inch arms, almost 81-inch wingspan. Like, dude's just so long and so athletic. That's why I had him higher. He's got the size, he's got the athleticism. In 2021, he had a lot of penalties, got very grabby. I thought he cleaned it up a lot in 2022. It still happened a little bit, but I saw the progression and how much he improved in that. And I just think he's going to get better and better. So I'm not too concerned about that. But as a press man corner, I think he does really well. I did almost have Banks above Porter, so they were very, very close in my mind. But I like Banks a lot too. I don't think you can go wrong with any of these top 4 corners, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Joey Porter, he was born to play corner. His attitude, like the way that he approaches the corner position, he is a corner through and through. He's got, for a guy that plays press, I think he actually has really good instincts in zone. So I don't think that they need to hide him in a press role. I think he can play off zone if they need to. He's not the fastest, and sometimes he can get grabby. But like you said, man, his length helps him recover so well. Yeah. His technique can get a little sloppy. He got called for penalties less this year, and it might honestly have just been from exhaustion. You almost didn't want to you had to set a precedent where you couldn't call it each time. He is very grabby at the top of routes all the time. But to be fair, that was a really big criticism of Sauce Gardner last year. Mm-hmm. So if you can clean it up and you're entitled to your space as a corner as well. So it depends on how the refs are going to call it that game. But if he gets a ref that's going to let the receivers and cornerbacks play, he's going to be an issue for anybody that he's playing on that outside position, even at the NFL level.
Yeah, another reason I liked him is just because his margin for error is so big. He doesn't have to have the best technique.
Yep.
I mean, as long as you're not getting grabby. If your footwork's a little bit off, that's okay because you have a 4.4 speed and 34-inch arms. You can make a small mistake and still recover. Whereas other guys, maybe not so much Deonte Banks, but other guys, because he's super athletic, but other guys down the list, if they aren't perfect, it's gonna be tough. They're beat. But with Porter, he can recover so nicely, and you're gonna get beat as a corner. Every single Sauce Gardner got beat last year. But it's how you recover, and you just want to limit those as much as possible.
Yeah, Deonte Banks, really, really nice tape. He's a guy kind of similar to the reason we both probably have DJ Turner and the reason that Christian Gonzalez is as high as he is those guys are 9-9 RAS scores, incredible athletes, which will always put you in a position to be successful. He's a press corner. I thought that Deonte Banks, another reason why he's exciting is his best tape was against his best competition. At least that's what it felt like when I was watching him. Mm-hmm. What else do I have here on him? There's a couple of guys in this class too where it's a shame that got left off the list for injury that I just kind of scrolled by. But I feel like he was a bit of a late riser. He was one of the guys that I had to ask you to get some tape on to watch. But I was pleasant because I think the last time we talked about him, I had seen some highlights and I was like, yeah. But on a snap by snap basis, he really is an intimidating force out there.
Yeah, I remember early in this offseason, he wasn't really on anybody's radar, and then one of the big draft guys like Brugler or someone, I forget who it was Zerlines maybe, put him in their first round mock, and everyone was like, whoa, who is this? Yeah, Brugler. And then everyone kind of went to the tape and was like, oh yeah, this guy has it. So then he's been slowly moving up. Not actually, I don't think he has been slowly moving up. He kind of shot up into the first round right away and then kind of has stayed there. Yeah. but yeah, he's really nice. I like him a lot. So we actually had the same top 5. And the other thing about all these guys, these guys on the list, even the guys like that we don't have on here, they're all elite athletes. Like there's not a
Yeah.
single person on this who didn't have like at least a 9 RAS score. I looked all of them up before I ranked them, and that's because there's probably not a position that's more dependent on athletic ability than cornerback. They need to be elite athletes.
Is there's someone that I didn't put on the list, and the reason I did is because there really aren't any great corners at the NFL level that prove to be bad athletes, which is like unfortunate because you don't want to rule someone out before they even play a snap in the NFL. But someone whose tape I loved, I loved their tape. I thought it looked so smooth. I thought they played great against Jordan Addison when they played them. They looked great on tape. I would never have guessed they would have. I think he ended up scoring as like a 5.1 RAS score. Was Clark Phillips.
Oh yeah.
Clark Phillips make my list basically on RAS score alone, because if you watch his tape, like it's some of the best tape in the class, but it's basically at the point in the NFL where, especially on the defensive side, you can get away being a lesser athlete on offense because you kind of get to dictate the way these reps are going to go. Because you have to be a reactionary athlete on defense, someone like a Clark Phillips, as much as I loved his tape, I kind of had to leave him off the list because it just does not translate well to the NFL.
Yeah, I thought I kind of did the exact same thing because his tape is good, and maybe if he were like a 7, RAS score, it'd be different. Like he'd be like, okay,
that
the
yellow,
tape's good enough. Yeah. So that was tough, but yeah, I still think if the Bears did draft him later on, if he falls to day 3 because he's not a great athlete, take a chance. He's probably a slot only guy, but I think he could be a good slot guy.
Yep.
So that's definitely someone. We both have Cam Smith at 5. I think is interesting because the consensus has been him dropping. It seems like he was almost in that top 4 tier at the beginning of the offseason, and I feel like now I think Dane Brugler has him at 10. I have him up here. Other guys have him like lower too. We both kind of sticking with him at 5 because I think his tape was really good. Probably better in 2021 than 2022. A little bit of a fall off, but I still like his tape a lot. So I was interesting that we both had him at 5 there.
Yeah, I like his tape too. It is deadly. It's what's funny is we have a very similar on both these lists of like we had our top 4 the exact same, a little mix up. We hit the exact same on number 5, and then after that we kind of had a bit of a crapshoot. But Cam Smith, I would say just from the athletic testing, like Deonte Banks and Christian Gonzalez are like elite of the elite of thousands of cornerbacks that did this. They're like top 50. Devin Witherspoon is the best tape in the class, and Joey Porter, like the way that his game translates, it's so obvious the reason that people like him. So I would say that they're almost in that own tier, and then I kind of have Cam Smith in his own like second tier down at 5. He has got awesome. He's got awesome instincts. His hips and the way that he moves. Maybe it wasn't like completely like solidified from his RAS score, but on tape it was almost so good that like I'm willing to like kind of like throw out anything that was a little bit like questionable. His closing speed on tape against like some great competition is awesome. He's a strong tackler. He comes downhill well. He's a full playmaker. He's got a lot of like the things you love about Devin Witherspoon, you love about Cam Smith as well.
Mm-hmm.
He can kind of get caught playing with his eyes a little bit, and like he can get burned from it. But like I think his recovery is good enough, and his hips are good enough that like sometimes it didn't matter. Now I think those kind of issues will be exposed a little bit more at the NFL level. But man, like he's a playmaker, and that's what you want from your cornerback position, and that's what someone like an Eberflus has said they want from their cornerback position is production.
Yeah, his ball skills are good. Like I think he had, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he had like over 10 interceptions in his career, tons of pass breakups. Like I think it was like 20% of his targets in his career were broken up either by interception or a pass breakup, something crazy like that. So yeah, just the production. And I think everyone kind of expected him to test as, not a great athlete, but he ended up testing as an elite athlete.
Yeah.
So that just shows that maybe people were kind of overthinking him, I think. But we haven't overthought him. I really like him. If he's there in the second and they want to do that, I'd pull the trigger easily.
Yeah, one of those later seconds, I would love that as well. He's kind of a big play guy. Like I think he gave up more touchdowns than I would have liked and hit like over his career. But like you said, like he's always kind of on that ball, and when you're taking the risk to meet the ball there, sometimes you're gonna have it where you'll catch it, and then once they catch it, you're kind of already out of the play. Yeah, I think his 2021 tape was better, but again, I could kind of care a little less that it went down from 1 year. Coverage is so volatile that you really just need to show that you're capable of playing in that top level to prove that you're able to play it. Like, it's not like, I don't think it's as like where you're trending. Like, some of the best corners in the NFL have down years. I think the high sides of his tape are as good as they get. He's another one of those guys that's a little smaller. I don't know if he's 185 pounds. Maybe he's 180 pounds, but he's bigger. I think he's 6 foot, maybe even over that. I loved his tape. I think his last 2 seasons on a whole, if you look at them as like one big body of work, were some of the best in the class.
Yeah, I don't put a lot of stock into his tape not being as good in 2022 because his tape in 2021 was really good, and the old adage is blue chip traits don't dissipate. So if you've shown that you could do that 2 years ago, you would still do it. It's just like you said, sometimes it's volatile. It's more of an issue if if someone has super productive year, 1 year, let's say they're a wide receiver, they catch 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, and then the next year the projection drops, but you watch their 21 tape and it was a lot of schemed touches and not, that's where it's an issue. But his tape is legitimately good in 2021 and also pretty good in 2022 too. It wasn't like he was bad or anything. So he's shown he can do it at a high level. I think he can do it at a high level at the NFL. All right, we're at an hour now, but I do want to kind of get through all of these guys. But let's get back to Kelee Ringo because I think he's interesting in this class. I have him at 7. You didn't have him in your top 10. Did he come close to making your top 10? Was it 11, 12? You don't have to know the exact number, but
bring it up. Left off the list. I love Garrett Williams. If he didn't get injured, he would have been higher. And Clark Phillips would have been right there for me. There's love for Caillou Blue Kelly, and there's love for Travius Hodgson-Tomlinson, and even I like Corey Trice.
I like Corey Trice.
He probably would have been in that range. I don't know if he would have been 11 or 12. Maybe he would have been 13. I like what he does. I think maybe he translates better to a safety, but honestly, we talked about it already today about how, you need to be a reactionary athlete, and like some of his athletic stuff is about as good as it can get. But his agility is like kind of like linebacker-esque. If his agility was if he was a linebacker, which like from a size point of view, it wouldn't be like a crazy thing to like look at.
Yeah.
He would be a little like light for that. But I mean, he went up against the best competition in the nation, and I don't think that he ever looked out of place. I don't know. I have my concerns about him being able to deal with smaller receivers or like even the bigger receivers that were like the best athletes in college when they were in college at the NFL level.
Yeah, I think moving to safety is definitely in play for him. But I think he can still be a pretty good corner. Yeah, I always give the edge to guys who play in the SEC just because those are most of the guys in the NFL played in the SEC or Big Ten. So so I'm going to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there. I thought his tape at times was messy, especially with his footwork. And like you said, change of direction can get a little sloppy, but he's young. He's athletic, at least straight line speed. I think could be really good, more of like a zone corner. Unfortunately, I think the best role for him would be like a cover 3 corner, kind of like the Seahawks run. Unfortunately for him, the NFL is kind of moving away from that middle of field safety, single high safety look and going to more of a cover 2 look. So I think his best fit is kind of a scheme that's kind of being phased out in the NFL. But I do like him still as like a zone corner who can kind of keep everything in front of him.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I like him as a safety too. He keeps everything when he's moving forward. Yeah, I like him a lot. When he's forced to backpedal, it's not as smooth. He can get burned a little bit.
I've thought that if he goes to like a Fangio system where it's like kind of quarters, but they're not asked to play press, and he can play 6 or 7 yards off the ball and like work forward, kind of like when we had a Mukamara on our team, and the stuff he was doing moving forward, it wouldn't be crazy to me if they asked like Kelee Ringo did the same. Yeah. I think that's a great way to phrase it. I think he does a lot better when he's able to move forward, and I think that if he's going to be drafted. The thing with him, and honestly, maybe the reason I was a little harsher on him, is that like the expectation is that he's a first or an early second round pick. Yeah. And like, I just don't think that I think that there's situations that you're going to have to hide him. So it would worry me about that in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I have first round grades in the top 4. Cam Smith is like a second round grade. I think DJ Turner, Kelee Ringo are both third round grades. But you're not getting him in the third round.
No, you're not.
It's almost like the value doesn't match up to where he's getting drafted. So
And I'm kind of at the point where it's like if you can't get him in the third round, I just if he's not going to be there in the third, then I just don't want him, kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else you just want to you mention?
For me, Emmanuel Forbes. Yeah, I mean we'll probably end up making this an hour 10 as opposed to an hour. That's life.
Yeah, that's all right.
Talk about Emmanuel Forbes next for me. You have him at 9. Emmanuel Forbes. He is the. Actually, you know what? We didn't even mention it in the receiver side. He's like the Tank Dell for me, or like even the Jordan Addison, where if he weighed 11 pounds more, well, honest to God, Emmanuel Forbes is so light he might even have 20 pounds more. He's like legit. I have to bring it up, but his RAS he might be 162 pounds.
I'll bring it up. Hold on. I think he was like 166. I want to say.
Yeah, 166.
So he was just under 6'1", 166 pounds. That's a 0.19 weight score. So yeah, that's the only thing having a 9 for me. I thought about having him not in the top 10 just because of his weight, but the ball skills are too good, the production's too good. Like I had to put him in there. He also did run a 4.35. So if you're going to be 166 pounds, you better run a 4.35 and with a 1.49 split, 10-yard split, and a 37-inch vertical. So that kind of saved him for me. There's that precedent for that is he's an outlier. If he succeeds, he's an outlier. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Emmanuel Forbes, playmaker, man.
Right.
He makes more plays on the ball than probably anyone else in the class, I'd say. I think he had like 3 or 4 pick sixes alone last year. He had 6 picks last year, 3 the year before, 5 the year before that. Now, that is coupled with probably giving up the most touchdowns of anyone that we're going to consider in this class. Over the last 3 years, he's given up like close to 15. But he is just always making plays on the ball. He's got like, for how good of his production is on the interception side, he does just as good a job on like the passes broken up side. His passer rating is consistently lower than like you'd imagine for like as many touchdowns as he gives up because he is a ball hawk.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, you said it like perfectly. So, ball hawk who's just really, really slight.
Yeah, dude, so slight. Like you'll watch his tape and be like, it's awesome, and I like you want to have a guy on that team, but then you'll also say to yourself, you have never seen a player that slim.
I was like, I don't think this guy's ever done a squat in his life.
No,
his ankles look like they're gonna snap.
No, it's crazy. He really is like he is kind of a one of one as far as like getting a pro comparison for him is like insane. He didn't bench at the combine, but if he did, it would have split him in half.
Yeah, there's no way he's benching 225. Yeah. Absolutely no way. All right, other guy we skipped is Tyreek Stevenson. So we both have him on this. You have him at 6. I have him at 8. I like Tyreek Stevenson a lot. I thought about putting him above Ringo. Really good man coverage corner. Yeah. Not as good in zone, but I think he's got good instincts. Former Georgia player, so he played at Georgia and then transferred to Miami.
Yep.
I thought his Georgia. I actually went back recently because I watched his Miami stuff, and I was impressed. I liked it. He was definitely a top 10 player. Then I went back and watched his Georgia stuff, and he wasn't graded as high. But I thought he actually played really well at Georgia too, so that was kind of interesting to see. So he was solidly in my top 10. I never considered not having him there. Another guy I think would be in play in that late second round.
Yeah, 100%. He had a great year. I thought he this year at Miami was better than any year he had at Georgia. Mm-hmm. He's another guy that went to the combine and looked like one of the best players there. Sorry, he went to the combine and had a great combine, and he went to the Senior Bowl. And he had an awesome Senior Bowl. And we've been saying there's a lot of stock to be said when you show up against peers that are all trying to get themselves drafted and you look the best. There's something to be said. He is a true senior, so he'll probably be 23 when the season starts. But he's another guy where I think if he gets into like a scheme where he doesn't have to be too close to the line of scrimmage, if he can keep things in front of him, I think his click and close is pretty good. I think his instincts are good. I don't know if his feet are great. His feet are good. I don't know if he's extremely fast, but he's not slow. You know what I mean? It kind of feels like that's a lot of what you're getting with Tyreek Stevenson.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good way to put it. I'm just trying to get through these now because I got to get going soon. Yeah.
I had next. I had Julius Brents in between. Julius Brents is a guy that I think has come on a lot late. if you had to think about Julius Brents in some way, I know we've done this a lot tonight where you compare him to a really, really lofty player, but I think his best type of game would be similar to something like a Richard Sherman, to be honest. He's got crazy long arms. I think he's got 34-inch arms like Joey Porter. I think he does a good job of like keeping the game in front of him. Like when he gets his hands on you too, like he really does engulf you. Like he doesn't let you off the line of scrimmage much. For being taller, I think he moves really well. I
think Brents is just really raw, which is what kept him off my top 10. I love the size, I love the athleticism, but I just think, I mean, I've done this before. We all fall in love with these, height, weight, speed cornerbacks, but there aren't that many examples of guys who are height, weight, speed cornerbacks and go into the NFL and actually get to where their potential is. Yep. Like if you ask me, I think I had Corey Trice higher than Brents, or at least I didn't exactly rank them after my top 10, but they were at least in that same tier. And I think you get Corey Trice 3 rounds later. So, that's kind of why I had him out there. I have Darius Rush as my 10th guy. If we're talking Senior Bowl guys, I don't think anyone had a better, at least at the cornerback position, a better week than Darius Rush. The way he's able to mirror guys' footwork and stay in front of him. He just had 1 rep at the Senior Bowl. That was so pretty. He just basically ran the guy's route for him. I forget who he's going up against. It was so good. So I had to put him in my 10. Athletic too. So I liked him a lot.
Yeah, only guy I have left. Julius Brents also, by the way. I think he was like a 9.9, like 5 or 9.98 RAS score, like explosive, quick. The only thing that was bad was that his full length 40 was a little slow, and that's kind of why I thought maybe he looked a little bit more like a Sherman type. Guy I had left is Moss, Riley Moss. It's so funny to say, man. Slight uphill battle trying to make it in the NFL because he is a white corner and those just don't exist. But he had 3 straight years of having awesome tape, I thought, at Iowa. And then he went to the combine and he tested great. I think especially like the on-field drills, he was a 9 or above RAS athlete. And then like when they were doing like the position drills and like the movement stuff, I thought he looked like one of the better dudes in the class, which was nice because it was pretty like validating based on how much I liked his tape. Like I don't think playing at Iowa, you're playing in a division where you're not playing against the greatest players. But I didn't think that I thought that he looked better than almost every receiver that he went against. I don't know how many times I saw him get like absolutely torched. I think his upside's pretty good. And I think that, from a size point of view, like he's exactly what you would want in the corner. He tested as an awesome athlete. He's over 6 foot. He's not too heavy. I think he's like 100, maybe 200 pounds flat.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I liked his tape a lot too. He also just kind of missed the list for me. So, so I'll tweet these out. Probably a lot of good guys we missed, but we're going to be on the pod next week as well before the draft. So probably Wednesday before the draft. We're also going to be doing live on Friday. So day 2 of the draft, we're going to be live talking about who the Bears, what the Bears did in round 1, who we want them to draft round 2, all that stuff. So we'll talk to everyone next week. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow on Twitter, all that stuff. And then until next time, Bears fans, bear down.
Bear down.